Life Camp USA is a nonprofit organization that mentors young men who have lost a father due to military or law enforcement service. Life Camp USA provides an all-expenses-paid, week-long, world-class camp experience that inspires, equips, and navigates these fatherless young men through some of life's toughest moments. Life Camp USA's mentors serve grieving families by helping these sons establish healthy identities, values, character, and goals without the crucial aid of a father in their life. To learn more about Life Camp's mission, visit lifecampusa.org. Again, that's lifecampusa.org.
Welcome to the No Regrets Leadership Podcast, where leaders are empowered to equip and disciple men.
Well, welcome to the No Regrets Leadership Podcast. My name is Steve Sonderman, and I'm going to be your host for today. And as you know, on a weekly basis, we love to take time to talk with speakers, with authors, ministry leaders, key thought leaders. And our goal is just to equip you and to encourage you to more effectively minister to the men in your sphere of influence. And today I have the special privilege to have with us Brett Clemmer. And Brett is the president of Man in the Mirror Ministries. And Brett has been a part of that ministry since the early 2000s and in various roles, and now leads that ministry. And I am so excited. We've just had a chance to catch up and just to hear some of the incredible things that Man in the Mirror is doing. And so, Brett, welcome to the podcast. I'm glad you could be with us.
Thanks, Steve. Always great to be with you.
Yeah. Well, why don't you just take a couple minutes and just bring us up to speed on what's been going on in the ministry, in your life, family, whatever you want to do. Just tell the listeners what life is like for you.
Yeah. Well, probably the most important thing is my wife and I just celebrated 32 years of marriage, and so we've had a wonderful year. As we were talking about, we went to Asia earlier this year for ministry work, but also took some time to vacation and just had a great time. And I'll tell you that one of the interesting things to me is my wife and I's the spiritual side of our marriage just has certainly had its ebbs and flows, but it's never been better than it's been in this last year. And it's just wonderful. We've always prayed together, but it's never been sometimes it's been a discipline and, not a joy. And sometimes it's been sporadic, but it's just been such a regular joy this year as we've spent more and more time doing that. And she's prompting me to grow, and hopefully I'm prompting her to grow. And so that's just a wonderful thing after 32 years to still be growing,
right.
Learning and doing life together. And then I got two adult kids. One lives in Chattanooga with his wife. He's involved in ministry, and then my daughter is in Orlando, and she's an IT pro and doing the remote work thing. And living the life, and her big project is a school bus that she's converting. So that's an interesting thing to watch also. So family's great, and the ministry's been great. We're lots of great things happening with our guys around the country, and being part of a big family is kind of fun. That's what it feels like with these guys, and then continuing to try to look in the ministry at what's going on in the church and in the culture, and the intersection of faith and masculinity is something we've been looking at a lot. And so we're just sort of trying new things, trying new projects and trying to decode, how to reach especially younger men these days.
Yeah. Well, I know most of our listeners are probably very aware of Man in the Mirror, and they've probably used some of the resources or been to some training. But there may be some guys out there that aren't real familiar with Man in the Mirror, or who are sort of new to ministry to men. Why don't you just take a couple minutes and just share what your vision is and sort of what you guys do, just so everyone, has a common understanding.
Yeah. So Man in the Mirror started 37 years ago as a Bible study in a sports bar in Orlando. And Pat Morley was a successful commercial real estate developer here in town. And Dr. Bright, Bill Bright from Campus Crusade, was his was one of his mentors. He was served on the Crusade board, and Dr. Bright challenged Pat to start a Bible study. And so he had a buddy that owned a sports bar, and it was open. It was empty on Friday mornings. So he started what was then called TGIF, and they started doing Bible study together. And that Pat turned out to be a gifted Bible teacher. And so that attracted men. And within a couple of years, it was averaging, 80 to 100 guys a week, and, moved to another venue. And so we've been going continuously for 37 years. That Bible study is still going today. If you're in Orlando on a Friday morning, look us up, and we'd love to have you. And so we, out of the Bible study, then Man in the Mirror was born. It was really, we've always been focused on resources for men. So Pat's written 23 books over the years, and has another one coming out next year. And so, focus mostly on Christian living and really from a male perspective, really trying to look at these things from a man's perspective. And then the ministry sort of evolved into one that really focuses on helping churches disciple men. We love the church. We are focused on equipping pastors and leaders in local churches. And we want to help churches build discipleship pathways for all of their men. And then ultimately, we want to see Christian men around the world engaged in meaningful relationships that change lives and build the kingdom of God. So we work through a network of area directors in the United States. And then we have a new growing ministry in Asia as well. And our guys bring in leadership training. We have a model called No Man Left Behind that helps churches think more strategically about how they disciple men, and then resources for having a men's event or getting small groups started or doing Bible study available that we just sort of offer through our guys. And so over the years we've seen Pat's books distributed. We've helped churches put these men's events on, and one of the things I'm proudest about is we've helped churches get about 90,000 men into small groups over the years. And so I'll go back to a church years later and see a network of small groups, and they'll say, yeah, we did an event about 5 years ago and got all these small groups started, and they're still going. And all we do is 6 weeks. We just do a 6-week group. But I think guys, once they get a taste of that relationship and diving into the word together, they crave it. So
yeah, well, that's great. I mean, that's really helpful. I knew most of that story, but not all of it. So it's always good to hear again what's going on. It's just incredible the way God has used Pat and you and your team really all over the country to mobilize guys and to get them connected in small group. Just simply amazing. And guys, for those who are listening, I would suggest, if you haven't been on their website, that you go there and you can see some of all the different resources that are listed or that they have available. We will have that in the show notes as well, and you can just go there and just a plethora of materials. Well, Brett, one of the things I wanted to talk about today is the new project that you're working on. Mm-hmm. You wrote the Spiritual Father Guidebook, and could you tell us sort of how that got started and the why behind what you're doing, and just sort of explain it to us?
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple years ago, we started a research arm at Man in the Mirror called Mirror Labs, and hired a young guy in his 30s, young to you and me, Steve, in his 30s, and he really just had a heart for reaching millennials and Gen Z guys, and so we spent some time doing some research into the deconstruction movement, into the rise of what they call the NONES, NONES, the no religious affiliation young men. We looked at the statistics on Gallup this last year. For the first time in the 80-year history of the Gallup poll, less than half of the people in the United States said that they're a member of a church. And if you look at young men, it's less than 36% are involved in a church or members of a church or have a church home. Orlando itself is the 6th largest de-churched city in the country. 45% of the people that live in the Orlando Metropolitan Statistical Area, MSA, used to go to church and now have not been in the last 6 months. And COVID just obviously just sort of accelerated that as well. Yeah. So as we were looking at younger men and, we started doing some focus groups, and we created some materials and tried those out, and those things went well. But one of the things that we heard over and over from younger guys is that they would love to have, from younger guys, is that they would love to have an older guy who would invest in their life, who would spend some time with them. In fact, we started asking the question, if there was an older, mature man who's got some experience, who just wanted to get together with you weekly or a couple times a month and have coffee or lunch, like, would you be up for that? And we've literally never had a young guy say no. And so, then we looked at, we also looked at like how does discipleship happen? We all believe no regrets, man in the mirror. I mean, we're all firm believers that discipleship is the answer to most of what ails us. And, we just, we found that the younger guys were not, when they were going to church, what they were not there were two things they weren't finding. They weren't finding authentic community. Instead, they were finding like activities to belong to, but not really authentic community. And then the second thing that they weren't finding is, and this is our term, they've never said it this way, but what we call elderly elders. And, Paul says in 1 Corinthians 11:1, imitate me as I imitate Christ. And so when it comes down to it, a lot of younger guys were saying, well, I don't see men around me whose lives I want to imitate. And so you've got this, a lot of churches talk about how do we get young guys to come in the door? And, we started saying, stop worrying about getting guys to come in the door. Let's start keeping them from going out the back door. You don't pour more water into a leaky aquarium. You fix the leaks first. And so we think the leaks, one of the ways that we can fix those leaks, we think is helping mature Christian men learn how they can interact effectively and really engage in an intentional spiritual friendship with a younger man. And so we've used the term spiritual fathers as the way of looking at that. And, kind of the Paul and Timothy model. And so out of this sort of research about younger men, watching the deconstruction, watching the de-churching movement, the rise of the nuns, and feeling like the answer is intergenerational, life on life, face-to-face men's discipleship. And where you have an older, experienced guy with a younger guy, and we look at life in thirds, Steve. So in the first phase of your life, you're a consumer. You're completely consuming your parents' food and your parents' money. You're consuming education and training. And so then you get to this point where maybe hopefully in your 20s you become a builder. And so builders they're building a life, they're building a career, a marriage, a family, a lifestyle. And then you sort of get towards the end of your career, and then we would hope you would become a giver. And so the builders are supporting the consumer, the builders are overseeing the consumers, but the givers need to be supporting the builders as they oversee the consumers. But what happens too often is people get to the end of their builder phase and they don't become givers, they become consumers again. And so they just consume everything that they've accumulated over their life. They're, and it's great, save for retirement. That's great. But I feel like nothing could be better than to be on your deathbed going, you know what? I don't have anything left to give. I gave all my energy, all my time, all my knowledge, all my experience. I gave it all away. I don't have anything left to give. And I think a man like that would have a trail of successful, godly younger men in his wake. And I will tell you, I've seen a man like that, because that's exactly how my father was. And, my father died 4 years ago, and you know, at the funeral, I just saw all these men. You know, he was in his 80s. I saw these men in their 50s that said, "Oh yeah, when I was in my 20s, your dad discipled me." And I know those men, and I know that there are men in their 20s and 30s now that those guys are discipling. And so it's the ancient order of discipleship. It's the way that Jesus set it up for us to do it. He was a 33-year-old rabbi with a bunch of old teenagers and guys in their early 20s, you know, so he did the exact same thing.
Right.
And so that's what we're trying to foster.
I just love the way the 3 stages, consumer, builder, giver. That is so understandable when you're talking to guys. They can get that. It is so obvious, you know, when you think about it. And then the problem, and I love the idea that at every level you're always the reaching back, but the problem being the giver becomes a consumer. Man, I just see that everywhere, and that is a great way to explain it, and to help to inspire and motivate people to say there is something bigger, something better you can be doing.
Yeah, absolutely. So I told you we talked to the younger guys, and they want an older guy to disciple them or to spend time with them. We don't need to use that word, especially for a guy outside the church.
Right.
But the older guys, when we go to them and we say, "Hey, do you feel like you should be discipling somebody younger? Would you like to disciple somebody younger?" And they almost always say yes. And then we say, "Well, are you?" And you sort of get the sheepish, staring at your shoelaces, "Well, not really," or "No." And then when we say, "Well, why aren't you?" A lot of times what we hear is, "Well, I just don't know what to do." So, well, that's a solvable problem, right? I mean, like we can help them figure out what to do. So that's sort of how the idea of 10,000 Spiritual Fathers was born. It came from a conversation over a lunch once with our Jeremy Shirky, our VP of Creative Strategies and who runs Mirror Labs. And he was talking with Pat and I actually, and he said, I really think that if we had 10,000 mature Christian men investing in the lives of younger men, he said, I actually think it would make an impact on the culture. And we were like, "You really think that?" And he said, "Yeah, I really do." And so we prayed about it for a while and said, "Well, let's set that as our initial goal. Then we'll just call the whole thing 10,000 Spiritual Fathers and we'll start up." And so our goal is to, bring in spiritually mature men or Christian men, mature Christian men, and give them a little bit of a taste of what it takes to be a spiritual father, and then put them in a small group with a couple of other guys who also want to be spiritual fathers. And we have this spiritual father guidebook that we wrote. And the goal of the guidebook is to give guys what we call soft skills. It's not a deep Bible study on why you should be a spiritual father. I think we all know why, even intuitively, even if we can't quote chapter and verse. But it's the how. It's the practical skills like listening skills and how to be an encourager and how to find a guy to be your spiritual son, and all how do they communicate? They don't ever answer the phone. I can't tell you how many older guys I've heard say, "Oh, they will never answer their phones." And we're like, "You're right. They will never answer their phones. So stop calling." Yeah. Text them and ask them to call you. That's the only, and they're probably not even going to do that. They're just going to text you back. So, and so we, really practical skills. And so the goal would be that a group of guys would get together. They would spend 12 weeks maybe going through the guidebook together. And by the end of that time, they would have each identified a younger guy that they want to invite to start getting together for coffee or lunch. And then they would start meeting with that younger guy. They would stay in their group of older guys, maybe meet a little bit less often, but so they can support each other and encourage each other in that process. Maybe even get together, in a larger group with everybody. But and then we're giving the spiritual fathers 1 year's worth of material to go through with their spiritual sons. It's very low hurdle. It's basically a series of questions to ask to build meaningful conversations over the course of a year that will lead to a deep, meaningful relationship and allow that older guy to speak into the younger guy's life.
Yeah. Boy, it sounds fantastic. And from my experience, like yours, just seeing the need for this.
Are you looking for a Bible study that will forge a deep and lasting connection with other guys? Then the Basecamp Bible Study Series is for you. Basecamp is a series of studies that will guide your men through the scriptures, addressing core disciplines of the Christian faith, while challenging them to become authentic and committed followers of Jesus. Each lesson includes a digital study guide, teaching videos, and leader notes to help facilitate transformative discussions. Start your spiritual journey today with Basecamp. Visit noregretsmen.org/Basecamp. Again, that's noregretsmen.org/Basecamp.
Like we were talking about before, the hardest part is helping the older guys to catch a vision for it, because there's a lot of younger guys that want this, as you said. No one's ever said no.
Right.
But trying to help guys, at least I have guys say, well, I'm too busy. They say, well, it's I've done my deal. I've taught the class, I've led the Bible study, I planned the event or whatever, and now it's someone else's turn. And so they've retired from work and they think they've retired from life. And it's just trying to help them catch a vision. Listen, say you're not done till the day you die. And, there's always more to do, and it's such a.
Well, and I think the other thing is that it's such a rewarding experience for the older guy. Like, there's nothing better than hanging out with a younger guy who's got a ton of energy and really wants your advice and wants your input. And and you've got experiences, you've got mistakes that you've made that you can help them avoid. There is nothing more fulfilling, really, I think, than speaking into another guy's life and actually making his life better. And I just think it's a vision problem for the older guys. It's not a, I think they think it's either a skill problem or a fatigue problem or a motivation problem, but it's really about vision. And it's like that. I don't know about you, but like, you go on a service project or short-term mission trip, and sometimes in the days or weeks leading up to it, you're like, oh, I don't believe I signed up for this thing. Man, can I get out of this thing? And then you go and you're like, that was the best experience of my life. It was so helpful and encouraging. And I think it's the same way for this, that once a guy gets into that relationship, he's gonna wonder what he was thinking, of trying to avoid it or what took him so long to do it. So
I can't tell you how many guys I've talked to who will say, oh, Steve, I have nothing to talk about. I don't have anything worth talking about. I don't have any experiences. And I'll just look them in the face and say, now, let me get this right. You've been married for 45 years. Right. You've got 4 adult children, and you owned your own company and ran it for 35 years. And, it's like, and you just share your experiences. And
answer questions. Yeah.
It's not, they don't want perfect. Yeah. They don't. Yeah. They want authentic. They want process, progress, ups and downs of life, the good, the bad,
Yeah. Yeah. So, I'll tell you the other two things that I hear 2 things from guys sometimes. I hear some guys will say, well, I don't know the Bible very well. I don't have any Bible verses memorized. I don't even think my faith is that strong. I don't think I'm the right guy for this. So they kind of feel unqualified. Yeah. And then the other kind of guy is well, you don't know what I've done. I've been divorced twice. I've got an estranged kid. I had an affair, whatever it is, they feel disqualified. Yeah. And so to the unqualified guys, I just say that all young men, they don't want a holy Joe. They want just a regular guy who will walk with them. Yep. You don't have to be a sage or a guru. You just have to be a humble, normal, everyday guy who's willing to help a guy talk through his questions and problems. And so the disqualified guy, I say, first of all those mistakes, those are battle scars, and all those mistakes are learning experiences. And if you're walking with Christ now, then you've got the experience of forgiveness, because I guarantee the younger guy is going to make mistakes that he's going to need to be forgiven for as well. And, and sometimes I have to look at those guys in the eye also and say, Jesus really did die for your sins. he really did forgive you. You actually are, those sins actually are forgiven. You don't have to walk around with that guilt anymore.
Yeah.
And sometimes you can see guys, just recognize they've kind of disqualified themselves from a lot of things they've not led an abundant life like they could have if they had just accepted what Christ did for them on the cross. And this is an opportunity to sort of live into that and make an impact.
Yeah. So, I think, Brett, what does, for you started talking about a little bit. Let's just grow this out. I think there's two areas I'd like you to hit on. Number one, what are the qualities, if you'd say there are 2 or 3 qualities you are looking for in a guy that make him a good spiritual father? And then what does success look like in that situation?
Yeah, I think the qualities are, somebody who's humble, has some humility, isn't trying to be perfect, isn't trying to be more than he is. Somebody who really wants to follow Jesus the best he can, so that he can model that. And then somebody who cares about younger guys, wants to, has some compassion and some empathy for what younger men are going through. So I think those are the qualities. I'll tell you what's not a quality. Bible scholars, not a quality. Perfection, perfect marriage, perfect kids, not a quality. I think those are things that guys use to disqualify themselves that they don't need to. As far as the success, I think the success, on a sort of less tangible way, I think the big success is the blessing that the younger guy gets. And, there's a lot of men walking around that have never had their father's blessing. And, you look at Esau, I'll tell guys, look at what happened to Esau. Jacob stole his birthright and then he stole his blessing. And just the anguish in, I think it's Genesis 27, the anguish that Esau goes through not having his father's blessing. And I think there are Esau's all around us that are craving a father's blessing. And an older guy spending a year having lunch or coffee a couple times a month, listening and answering questions and offering, encouragement and, helping a guy pick a guy up after he makes a mistake and celebrating his successes and victories with him. That is a blessing for that younger guy. And what a blessing accomplishes in a younger man's life is it gives him identity. It helps him understand who he is as a man, not as a little boy anymore, but it's really a passage into manhood. And I think it helps him identify his purpose, and shows him where his life's going to go. Yeah. And that's what men need. They need to know that they're a man. The young guy needs to know he's a man, and he needs to know that his life has a purpose and a trajectory. And that's something I feel like you can figure it out on your own, but man, it's a lot better to do that with an older guy walking beside you, helping you do that.
Yeah. You just think of the times where the father spoke to Jesus and affirmed him in that. And that was the blessing, and that's the opportunity that these guys have to tell these younger guys that you
absolutely
are, and you have worth and value, and God has a plan for you.
Absolutely.
I'm just thinking in my mind, Brett. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so important. And if I'm not thinking right here, just tell me on the podcast. That's fine. Would this be a book, the guidebook? Now I'm talking about. Yeah, like a older group of guys could go through together. Yeah. And then they would go through it, 6-8 guys, whatever your small group is. And then they could almost, like you said, get to the end, talk about who they want to, invest in, and then literally hold each other accountable in a sense for doing it. But is it designed for an individual and a small group?
Yeah, it's really designed for a small group. It's designed for a group of guys to go through together. And we actually suggest in threes and triads, 3s or 4s. And the reason we suggest something a little bit smaller is because once you get into having a spiritual son and you're going to want to come back and talk about it, and you're going to be there for 3 hours if you have 8 guys, who
Yeah.
all want to, who
Yeah.
all have to share their experiences from the last,
Right.
couple
That's
weeks or the last
Yeah.
month, however often their
Yeah.
group meets.
Okay.
So yeah, we kind of, in a perfect world, we would say, get 2 or 3 other guys, meet for 12 weeks, go through the book a chapter a week, and then go get spiritual sons, each of you, and then maybe your triad or your group keeps meeting maybe once a month from that point on, so that then you can take that time that you've already got set aside and you can invest that now, some of that in a younger guy. That would sort of be the pattern.
Okay. That's great. No, I'm glad you shared that. And that's sort of what I was thinking in my mind.
Yeah.
I've looked through the book, but I couldn't remember how many chapters there were and things like that.
It's 12. And what we're doing is we're actually offering an orientation. A lot of churches are hosting an orientation.
Okay.
So we provide all the materials for that, a couple of videos and a structure and handouts and all that kind of stuff at the orientation, including the guidebook and then the first 3 months worth of material to meet with a spiritual son.
Okay.
And so those orientations, there's already 20 of them scheduled around the country, and more churches are jumping in, and anybody that wants to can host an orientation.
Okay.
And then we'll even provide one of our area directors will come and help facilitate it.
Okay. Well, I'm going on record publicly here that we definitely want to do one.
Awesome.
And, I know we have some area directors up here in the Milwaukee area, and I've got a list of probably about 100 guys that should be there, and I will really get there because
Should we name them on the podcast too?
That's a good idea. I think we might just do a separate podcast and just do a reading. Oh my gosh, yeah,
that's great.
Brett, I can't tell you how excited I am for this. I'm so grateful that you've come up with this and made this available, and just tell the guys how they can get more information on the guidebook, potentially hosting it, in orientation, and just everything that you're doing related to this.
Yeah, so this initiative has its own website, which is really easy to remember. It's spiritualfathers.com. And on that website, we've got how to host an orientation, how to get the materials, a bunch of articles, like links to a bunch of articles that sort of talk about the cultural soup that our young men are swimming in right now, and some of the statistics that we've mentioned. It's all on that website. And then the ability to look and see if there's an orientation close by that you can sign up for. We have right now, they're starting at the end of September, they're going through November. And so if somebody wants to jump in, they can certainly do that. But I'm really encouraging guys that are interested. I'm telling them, find 2 other guys your age and bring them along so that the 3 of you can go through the book together, and then you can support each other through the process. Yeah.
Well, I'm sure the orientation would be very, very helpful. And like I said, want to see guys do that everywhere. But my guess is you could just get started. You don't have to
Absolutely.
wait. Just grab a couple books, and they get the books from the same website.
Everything's at spiritualfathers.com. And then, we have the ministry's website's manandthemirror.org. Lots of other, like you said, lots of other materials there, and all of our contact information's in both places.
Good. Super. Well, thank you so much for taking the time this morning to talk and to explain this. I'm so excited and really looking forward to how God's going to use this just to really invest and pour into this next generation. Well,
it's like I said, it's an honor always to be with you. We've been doing this for a while now, you and me, and so it's fun to see the Warriors continuing to fight on.
Yeah, you bet. Well, on behalf of Brett and myself, we want to thank you so much for listening today, and I hope you've been encouraged, inspired to take that next step. If you've just sort of been looking for what's my ministry going to be, or what can I do, this is it. This is something every man can do. There's men younger than you. Whether you're in your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, there's someone younger that you can invest in. And so please go to their website, look up the material, order one of the books, and find a couple guys, and let's start changing things together. So have a great week, and we'll talk to you next week, guys.
Thank you for joining the No Regrets Leadership Podcast. For more information and to access past recordings, please visit www.menwithnoregrets.org/podcast.
MK Cellular, your local U.S. Cellular authorized agent, is a proud supporter of No Regrets Men's Ministry. Find our locations at mkcellular.com.